All right, we're back. Don't feel camera ready yet. So it's good to see you guys. It seems like a million years since we were together. As I was telling some of your classmates before you got here, I'm not well, clearly. But I don't want us to fall so far behind that it's unrecoverable. I do, when I build a syllabus, typically try to pad it and build myself in a little bit of time so that, for these kind of things. And every winter, unfortunately, it seems I must have a weak immune system because I seem to get every cold that comes along. Some people never get sick. Some people get it and they're done in a day or two. I started like last Tuesday night, just with that feeling like, you're going to get sick, right? And then it came on strong. So I'm on the other side. I think I'm getting better, but I'm concerned about laryngitis now. And if I blow my voice out, then I lose more classes, and less concerned with you guys because this is upper level and you can work on your own and do the discussion boards and whatnot. But for the big courses with 80 people that are freshmen, they need somebody there. So we'll probably just do a little shorter one today, if that's all right with everybody. And if you guys want to discuss stuff, I'm happy to throw some stuff out there and just hear what people think or if there are ideas that you've got on your own relevant to either the discussion board conversations or the reading that you've done. So matters of business. First thing, I know everybody's interested in the exams, and I'll talk about that here in just a little bit, but the first thing is being sick has allowed me to get a little bit of time to do some stuff. So I've got a schedule. This is a tentative schedule here, presentation schedule, that is. And so a couple of things. First of all, and for our online folks, David, Lynn, I'll put it on Canvas later tonight when I get home so that everybody has it. So we've got this week, next week, then we're off for 7 days or 10 days or whatever for spring break. Then we come back and we would have one more week of what we've been doing, this kind of didactic, primer, get everybody sort of on the same page about epistemology. And then the remainder of the semester, each class meeting will be dedicated to one of you. So you'll be the star of the show instead of me, which is always nice. Because I want to hear what you guys think. Seriously, it's a lot more fun than didactic lecture for the most part. So that's the tentative schedule. I didn't give a whole lot of time or thought to the ordering here. So here's what I will say. I know that people get antsy about leading discussions and presentations. I'm not nuts about public speaking either, and I never in a million years did I think I would have a job that would involve basically doing some public speaking every day or every other day. It's pretty crazy. It's like giving a speech every time you turn around. So if you want to switch with somebody on a date, if you get with the other person and agree that you're both cool with switching, that's fine. Just let me know with enough lead time so that I'm prepared for what we're going to be talking about that day, because obviously I have to go back and reread all these articles myself as well. So you can swap with somebody if you wanted to. If I've got you down for the wrong article, then definitely let me know. Or if you've changed your mind or change your mind between now and the date that I've got you down for, that's all. I'm flexible on that too. Again, just as long as I get enough lead time so that I can prep, then that makes things go better for me and for everybody. And as I say, I'll post this on Canvas. Does anybody see anything right off the bat that they know is not right? And the dates look okay? So I'll try to formulate my thoughts more clearly as far as a little rubric, if that'll help, or just some guidelines for what I have in mind for these student dedicated days. But in my experience, I mean, you think, we're just going to do a 10-minute spiel and then move on, but it never works that way, because once we get done with Feldman, we'll be looking, these are all professional articles that appeared in the major journals, and most of these are kind of considered classics now. A lot of them are. And so they're hard. They're hard to read. They're harder to get through, tougher than Feldman type stuff. Although that's why I'm doing Feldman first, because that kind of primes you for this get up to speed stuff. So in my experience, it usually would take an entire class time for one paper, if we're going to get into any of the details. So that's how I'm sort of seeing it in terms, but I don't expect it to necessarily be a didactic kind of thing. I'd like to have it be a conversation as well. So having a handout for it that you can give out to everybody, or if you don't want to do the handout, you having something you can project, that helps a little bit. If you want to do it from where you're sitting, that's cool. If you want to be up here, that's all right too. This is a speaking intensive course, and so it's not as though, I mean, I would probably at this level have done something like this anyway, because I think it's important for people to get practice, even though we all, or many of us, sort of dread it. It's a fact of life. In almost any job, you're eventually going to probably have to do some sort of get up in front of people type stuff, whether, even if it's in, say, business. My brother's a salesman. All he does is give presentations all the time. He never thought that would be that way, you know? He thought he'd just be selling stuff, but he's actually giving presentations. And the idea is that because this is the capstone, you're supposed to give the presentation, get critical feedback from me, and then do it again. Well, that just seems ridiculous, frankly, for a presentation. I understand a rewrite of a paper, but this is stuff that these decisions get made outside of our department in the general education curriculum committees. And so it's a Byzantine process to understand. So what I was going to do is just have you, after you do yours, I'll give you some feedback, and then between that time and the end of the semester, the last day or whatever, or the day that our final would be, you just email me a video version of your presentation. That would be a shorter version, of course. It would be, 15 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever, whereas the one in the classroom, I'm figuring will probably take up each meeting. Will probably be dedicated to a single thing. So that's the idea. What else is there? Let's see. I had another thing. So this will be out there. I've posted another discussion thing, the one it's been out there since I think I got it up there like Friday or so. So if before our next meeting you can get an initial response and or some replies, that's great, because it helps me figure out which way I want to go in our get-togethers. It's about internalism and externalism, and thinking about that's where we're kind of headed. Chapter 5, these non-evidentialist theories of knowledge, and that's fun stuff to think about. So the exams, I don't have them with me, but I will say a little bit about how I think about them, so that it'll help you. I'll post the grades tonight as well. Overall, good. I'm happy. I'm pleased. I think grading-wise, I'm going to take it a little easier on this first one, as far as my normal sort of thing, just because it's the first one. You didn't really know what to expect, maybe, and that gives. I don't want to have people getting discouraged right off the bat for any reason. In general, I thought I was pleased with how people did. So I'll say some first about how I go about grading, and of course I'll have to throw in my 2 cents about the significance or maybe a lack thereof of grading, and then some little points about things that I saw happening that'll help, I think. So what I do in these kind of situations is, and I hope this helps you to hear this, because I don't know that most teachers would tell you this sort of stuff, but what I do at least is, I just printed them all out, and I just grab one and start reading it and just get a feel for it, put it down, grab another one, read it, get a feel for it. And as you start doing that, then I sort of lay them out on a table, and I just try to get them in an order, just an initial rough order from best to next best to next best, roughly, whatever best means, right? And then I try to go back, once I've got the ordering where I want it, then I go back and I read each one more carefully, trying to make some notes in the margin. And unfortunately, my handwriting is absolutely horrendous. So if I have the time and I feel I can do it, I'll try to maybe type up some comments to add to what I've printed out for you with my terrible penmanship on it. So that's kind of the initial process. And it's just this rank ordering kind of thing. Now, of course, once you're done with all this, you have to put a grade on these things. And I'll be honest with you, I've always thought grades were kind of silly. When I was in your shoes, like you, I cared about grades, because people get hung up on this stuff. I mean, they've got a GPA and they want to maintain certain standards, and they know that even if they're not really technically important, other people think they are. You know, the implications for going to graduate school or for whatever it is you want to do, you know, I understand people's concern for all of that sort of stuff. It's definitely the least fun part of my job, is having to grade work. I think I take it seriously, and that makes it hard too, because, you know, I want to give feedback that's helpful, and I want people to be encouraged and not discouraged, right? So in my view, it'd be nice if it could just all be pass-fail. I think pass-fail would be awesome. But it is what it is. So having said that, you can make an A whatever you want an A to be. You can make a B, same with any of these things. So it could be everybody gets A's and B's, or everybody gets C's and D's, or, it's the age-old teacher's dilemma. You can make a test that everyone can pass. It's too easy. You can make a test that no one can pass. It's too hard. So it's sort of a Goldilocks syndrome problem, right? Trying to get it just right is a tough thing. So that's my process, at least. Hopefully that helps you sort of understand where I'm coming from. As far as other comments, kinds of things that I saw happening, so there's different kinds of things that I'm looking for. So the first thing is what I think of as just kind of like, did the person answer the question correctly? In other words, did you get it right? Okay. Obviously, to me, that's the most fundamental thing, is getting it right, or as close to right, or something, right? So that is kind of a content matter, and that's important, obviously. And people are kind of all over the map with that sort of thing, right? I mean, some people totally nail it and get it right. Some people just miss it. They get confused or something. Then there's stuff in the middle. There are people who certain things are right, and then there's some stuff that's kind of a little bit wonky. It's not quite right. So you have to sort all that out. That's one of the things I was paying attention to. And again, hopefully some of my comments, if you can read them or if I can get them typed up, will help give you some direction. It's easy in these things, so that's one, and in addition to that, some little detail things that will help in the future. One, it's helpful if you can number the pages. I mean, I can write numbers on them, but these are just like little things. But number the pages. It makes it easy for me to make reference back to other pages. The folks who modeled their style of answer on what Feldman's done, in terms of just, if you're going to make a reference to a Gettier proposition or to a certain statement or whatever, I like it when it's set off. So in other words, make it kind of look like he does it. So he's very good at that. He'll say, consider the following statement, statement one, and then you've got that statement. It's not just a formatting thing, right? I mean, it's also important philosophically, because when we get loose and sloppy and you sort of don't really precisely identify the statement or the proposition in question, then it's really hard for me to know what you're thinking, right? I can't kind of read your mind in the paper, so to speak, and that becomes an issue. So some folks did better than others with identifying, very carefully, precisely what the proposition in question is, or what the point is, and really spelled it out for me. And other folks, it was a little bit looser, So that's just a kind of general point about things that you can do in the future that'll help. So that's all to the question of content and getting it right, and things you can do to help yourself do better there. The other thing, of course, that you have to consider when you're reading this kind of stuff is the technical aspects of just writing, right? Like, is it well written, style-wise? Let's face it, some people are better writers than others, right? Some people, just like some people are better skiers, and some people can play the guitar better. You have a class full of guitarists, and it'll be the same thing. It's just individual variation. Some people have had more practice at writing. Some people probably just are naturally more gifted at it, right? Just like mathematics or physics or whatever. There's a range. And that matters. That makes a difference, right? I mean, it's frustrating, I know, for you, and it's frustrating for me too, because you're like, well, I got the answer, but I didn't get as good a grade as I wanted. Why not? Well, maybe some of those things may have been stylistic things, right? Just that it was right, but it wasn't said as well as, somebody else said it. And that's, so I kind of, I don't really, I try not to have an absolute standard in my mind. You're sort of ranked with your cohort, with your group mates, your classmates, right? Is the answer grammatical in the sense that we've got lots of grammatical mistakes? In other words, does it look like anybody proofread it? And I know, because I've been a student my whole life, that when you're done with writing a thing like that, an essay exam or a paper especially, it's really tempting. You're just so relieved to be done. It's really tempting to just kind of push it out and let it go. But if you can get some distance on it and then go back and reread it yourself, proofread it a couple times before you turn it in, you can catch a lot of mistakes. And some of this is, again, just, human error, right? People spelling mistakes, typos, sentences that aren't really grammatical. A lot of, some of this back to the style matter, things awkwardly put, an easier, more clearer way to express it can be an issue. So I noticed, some of that kind of stuff happening as well. Sometimes I think people, so that's sort of the grammar and style type stuff. So I encourage you to pay close attention to that. It's easy with these examples and counterexample kind of situations where you have to come up with a story. It's easy to get two ends of the spectrum. It's easy to over embellish the story. In other words, the story gets so elaborated that you kind of lose, the old forest for the trees kind of thing. And you can see it happening sometimes. Like people, they got so immersed in building their story, maybe, that when it came time to draw the philosophical conclusions, maybe they missed their own point, or they thought the example showed something that it didn't show, or there was a disconnect there. That happens, and that's pretty common. So something to be aware of. Another kind of thing that happens is stuff being under-described, like not enough of the relevant details. And this is just a matter of practice, Feldman, he makes it look easy, but it's hard. It really is. When you start to think about it, it's pretty tough. So, as I said, I'll try to go kind of generous on the grading since this is the first one, and it's certainly my goal that everyone do well and succeed. So questions about that from you guys, any of that kind of stuff? Yeah, Tamir?
You said that you don't have copies of the test, so you printed copies out and then you have them in your office?
No, they're back at my house, actually, in my apartment. I've got them, that's not because I don't want to read it on the screen, mainly because of the computer vision syndrome thing. I'm at the age now where my eyes are really starting to go. I never have had any issues. But to read, I have to wear these reading glasses, and it's just, sitting at the screen all day. So I printed them out, and then I was writing my comments on the, highlighting and underlining things. In the another thing that could help in the future is if everybody, and I assume just about everybody has access to Word. Some people submitted things in formats that, I could get it open, but it was an odd format or something that was unfamiliar to me in terms of. I'm not a computer person, so if you can submit them in Word in the future, then I think there's a thing in new versions of Word that allow you to track changes or whatever, or to make comments. I think it's an insert comment feature. And that way I could type my comments into your document. Like I could open your document and make my comments on the keyboard, and that'd be a lot more effective. So anybody that can do that, that'll be a help. Yeah. But were you done with your question?
Yeah, it was leading up to if it was in the office, could the office get that possibly?
Yeah. No, yeah, it's not that simple. Sorry, Tamir. Yeah. So I'll post the grades tonight. How's that? I'll give you the grades, and then I'll bring the papers with me next time. Part of it is that I've got all the question 1 done, and sort of that's fixed. Question 2, I've got the ordering, but I want to go back through it again one more time and just make sure. I take it seriously. Like I said, it's not easy. It's a hard, not very fun part of the job. I mean, you'd think that you'd like it because it's like, well, this is your way as the instructor of seeing how your students are doing. Are they getting it? And this is feedback for me too, and it is. But I also recognize, we're philosophers, right? I mean, this whole grading thing is just out of control, right? I mean, this sort of grade inflation, everybody just showing up is supposed to be a B+. right? And it's like, and that's just not the way life really works, right? I mean, and it's worse with the big 100 level courses, obviously, in freshmen coming right out of high school, because their K through 12's been teaching to the test and all these end of grade exams and a lot of this stuff. I'm cynical, of course, at my age, but I feel like so much of this stuff is driven by an assessment crazy culture in education at the level of K through 12, and then it's filtering up, you know. Then they come to college and they don't understand why they're not, they had a 5.0 in high school. Why can't I get an A on everything I attempt to do in college? Well, because, you know, it's harder. It should be harder. There should be standards, you know. So, I mean, I hope that helps a little bit. I was kind of long and rambling on my part, but, yeah, I'll post the grades though, and I'll bring them with me next time and give them back to you so you can look at them. I think that's cool. All righty. Well, so it's been a while since we've been together, but my recollection was last time we were together, we were talking about Quine's view, the web, as a kind of metaphor for the coherence theory, right? And so I was wondering if folks had questions on coherentism. We can talk a little bit about it. I've got some of my notes, and I'll try to take Maggie's out of the office today. She's out of town. But I'll try if I can get in tomorrow or early Wednesday to get the notes that I project in here out there so in a form that I can put them on Canvas. I don't have the electronic versions of these notes, and so I'm having to have them scanned. The documents have to be scanned and turned into something that they can then send to me, and I can put them up on Canvas for you. But and I'll put that out there for the online folks as well. So, what do people think about coherentism? What do you want to talk about? Everybody like it? Didn't like it? You enjoyed it?
Yes.
Are you a card-carrying coherentist now?
Maybe not a card carrying,
Yeah.
but it does appeal to me.
Yeah.
It does make a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And I feel like I missed something when we first went over it, because it's saying, it's not that you can just justify beliefs by like basing on others, but it's like more subtly like the way they're really.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was an important point. I didn't realize that when I first read through.
Yeah, I was going back through this before our meeting today, just trying to refresh myself on it, because I'm scrambling, this being my first capstone. And yeah, it's subtle and it's hard stuff too, right? I mean, sometimes you have to read it several times to make sure you're getting the subtlety out of it. Of course, one of the big questions for coherence theorists is, you know, what is coherence? I mean, so the initial idea is kind of attractive. I agree. I mean, because it does seem like it's a good thing, epistemically, for beliefs to hang together, for them to fit together, and that a system of beliefs that does that is preferable, all things considered, right? Other things being equal, to a system that's certainly incoherent, right? We don't want that. But as some of this early stuff that Feldman's doing kind of makes clear, just figuring out how to formulate the view, he goes through 3 versions, right? To get to a version that you can even kind of think about. So the main point, of course, is that coherentism is the main rival to foundationalism. And in the student presentations, some people have selected articles that specifically address the foundationalism coherentism debate. So using what you've learned from Feldman and from our discussions in class, hopefully that'll help you do your best if you've got one of those topics for your paper. So recall, you know, that foundationalism is kind of a 2-tiered structure. You've got the basics and the non-basics, and the non-basics are the ones that are derived somehow, right? If you're a Cartesian foundationalist, classical foundationalist so-called, then we sort of have a picture where the basics are these beliefs that have the status that they do in virtue of being infallible or being certain, right? And so that's the answer to the question, what makes the basics basic? And then to the other question of what's the relationship between the basics and the non-basics? Well, it's a very tight relationship. It's deductive, right? And we saw last time how ultimately foundationalism of that variety seems to kind of overreach. And at the end of the chapter, Feldman proposes his own version, right, which is a kind of modest foundationalism. Coherence theorists reject this kind of two-tiered structure. So for them, all beliefs are sort of on the same playing field, right? There aren't any beliefs that don't derive at least some of their justification from connection with other beliefs, right? So those basics that get justified, but not in virtue of other beliefs, but rather in virtue of experiences, right, immediately, the coherentist rejects that picture, right, in favor of this idea that it's kind of like a crossword puzzle. If you're going to change 6 across, you're going to probably have to change 4 down, because it's all got to kind of fit together. But still, the sort of figuring out what makes these things fit together is challenging. So Feldman here, he's got, as I say, only beliefs can justify other beliefs. Nothing other than a belief can contribute to justification. In some of the discussion, it seemed like, I'm thinking maybe it was you, Tyler, talking about wanting to be able to have experience get into the picture. And I think that's really important, in part because if you got through this section recently or you remember it, we've got that isolation problem, right? The isolation objection. And that's a kind of worry. But at least the version of coherentism that's under consideration here, experiences don't seem to make any justificatory contribution. I mean, it's only beliefs that can contribute justification. I agree. I totally agree. If that was your point, I think you'd said something, or maybe I'm remembering somebody else. Yeah. So in any case, so we've got these two claims, right? The first one, C1, only beliefs can contribute, and that every justified belief depends in part on its relationship to the other beliefs. And so this idea of what is coherence comes up, right? And he talks about positive coherence and negative coherence, right? So we say that a belief's positively coherent for a person just in case it's supportive, and it's negatively coherent, right, just in case it conflicts. And as I say, I mean, it's a compelling idea. I mean, who doesn't want their overall corpus or whatever of belief, right, to have a high degree of coherence? But saying exactly what that amounts to is tricky. At a minimum, one would like to think that all the beliefs be consistent, right? So if you know that you've got a set of beliefs, and one thing you know is that they're inconsistent. In other words, they can't all be true together. That would seem to be a bad thing, right? That makes for less coherence, whatever else coherence might be. So consistency is kind of like a standard thing that everybody kind of wants to have in the picture. The other thing that's been discussed a lot, particularly by people like the early sort of like godfathers of coherence theory, were people like Keith Lear and Larry Bonjour. Bonjour's since kind of changed his mind and become a sort of moderate foundationalist. By the way, if you do try to put experience into the picture in a way that I think is needed, and Feldman points this out, then it looks like what you end up with is sort of modest foundationalism. That's what's supposed to be so characteristic about coherence theory is that it's just only beliefs that are doing the work, right? So in any case, let me scroll this down a little bit here so we can see it. So what I was saying about having consistency as a sort of minimal kind of requirement, here's the problem, of course. We all know that our beliefs we've got inconsistent set of beliefs pretty much all the time, right? Because, I mean, we're not perfect, right? We make mistakes. We're trying to get better, but hopefully, and certainly you don't want to continue, I would hope, or you don't want to persist in believing known inconsistencies, right? Something's got to go. You know that if P and Q can't both be true together, then one of them's got to go. But which one, right? This becomes an issue as well because, as Feldman points out in that part of the chapter, you can come up with cases where you might increase overall positive coherence by dropping either one or the other, but you're not told which one to drop. And in a lot of those kind of cases, we have an intuition about which one's the bad one, right? His thing with the Miracle Grow and for the hair and everything, right? So here's an initial formulation down here. I don't know if people needed me to say something about it or not, if it would help. So the first version that he comes up with is CT, right? S is justified in believing that P is true. And oh, here's another thing. I'm sorry I'm so spaced out today, but I'm like, it's way too much cold medicine. Cold medicine will mess you up. You feel like your head's like a balloon on the ceiling. Back to the exams too. The one little point. It's helpful for me. It's the small thing, just like numbering the pages and precisely identifying the statement or the proposition or propositions that are going to be discussed or that are in play. Another little thing I noticed, and this is picky and silly, and I'm not going to like downgrade you for it on this first test, but try if you can to observe conform to the sort of conventions when it comes to the naming of things, like P for proposition is good, and S for the subject is good. You know, you could use X's and Y's or A's and B's, it works. It's just that, and the best rule, sort of roadmap for that is just Feldman, and that's why I'm using him, you know. It's just, make it kind of look like his, right? Don't copy what he's doing, right? That's plagiarism, and that would be unethical. But, you know, just you can sort of model your style after his for the purposes of what we're doing here. In other courses and other situations, you have to adapt, you know. Whatever that teacher wants is kind of what you end up doing. But it just made me think of that because there were some cases where people had kind of, and again, this isn't, you know, try to put it the right way, where people had kind of done their own conventional type thing, and it can be tricky sometimes to follow and confusing, hard to know what's what. So this is an initial version, and then we get to here. So we gotta make that first version more precise, and he gives us, we need to know what it is, what counts as the system of beliefs, right? And what it is for a belief to cohere with the system. So one proposal is your system of beliefs is just all of your beliefs, everything that the person believes, right? And we say that a proposition, one proposal would be an initial proposal. Proposition coheres with the system provided it logically follows from the conjunction of everything in the system. Did people see what the problem with that one was? I should be covering it up probably, so you have to work at it a little bit. But somebody want to explain it? What's the worry about CT1? This is why I'm saying sometimes you kind of go through this stuff kind of slow, because it's like, you know, it's deceiving. This is such a thin little book, and his writing style is just kind of like easygoing, you know? And you're sitting there and you're reading, listening to music, watching TV or whatever, and you finish it up and you're like, yep, I got it. And then later on, you didn't get it, you know? Yeah, Tyler.
It's saying that, I'm trying to think of how to put it in the words without this copying what I've done in the mind, but like,
Yeah.
it doesn't, it leaves the option if all your beliefs happen, if you only have a couple beliefs, so supposedly, and they work, then anything based on those two beliefs works, or it's unjustified.
Yeah,
It all kind of depends on that initial.
yeah, that's in the ballpark. It's close, right? I mean, so suppose, maybe this is kind of the point you're trying to make. It looks like you can get just about anything justified.
Yeah, depending on what your initial premises are.
Right. So suppose so if your system of beliefs is everything you believe, right? And you believe P and Q and R. Let's suppose you have a very minimalistic system of beliefs. You've got exactly three. we won't ask what sort of being this is or about their cognitive abilities. But fairly limited, right? The first stab at AI or something. The version 1. So you've only got three beliefs, P, Q, and R, and the proposal is that P is justified just in case it can be deduced, right? It follows logically from everything you believe. Well, you believe P, Q, and R, and of course P is an entailment of that, right? P, Q, and R entails P, and Q and R, right? And all the conjuncts. So that's sort of vacuous, right? You can get anything justified there, and intuitively that's wrong because we shouldn't be able to just justify any old thing. I mean, it has to have a little bit more teeth to it than that. So then there's this other one here, right? CT2. And the idea here is that S is justified in believing a statement if and only if S's system of beliefs is coherent, whatever that is, and includes a belief in P. And the worry here is that it looked like it made everybody, well, first of all, as Feldman points out, we would like to be able to think of systems as being more or less coherent. It's not an all or none feature, and it certainly, none of us have a, I'm assuming none of us have a completely consistent set of beliefs, because there are things in there that we're unaware of that conflict with other things. We can't route out all of our inconsistencies. That's just a fact of the way we are cognitively, right? This is why trying to model epistemic logic on classical logic is tough, because in classical logic, whenever you get a contradiction, you can derive anything from a contradiction, right? People know that, right? And see how that works? Suppose you've got P and not P. Everybody here had logic or in logic now? Who's already had it? Okay, and some people are in it? Yeah, okay. So, yes, you've got P and not P. Suppose you believed that. Well, how could you do that? Well, suppose that, in one turn of mind, you're thinking about P and you believe it, and then somehow you've got something else that's incompatible with it, right? This is an explicit contradiction, so hopefully people aren't walking around doing this too much. But certainly you can get stuff that's incompatible, right? You can simplify to P, right? Just simplify. And then you can use the law of addition to get P or Q. Q can be anything you want, right? Then you can simplify again and you can get not P. And now you've got P or Q and not P, so you can get Q. And this is a principle called explosion. So that's the main reason why in classical logic, right, yet we don't allow for these contradictions. Okay? But there are paraconsistent logics, other kinds of logics that are out there, where they try to manage these kinds of issues so that we could maybe model how people actually are, right? Because, as I say, we know that we're not perfect. We make mistakes, and our our systems are inconsistent in all probability, and yet we still manage to reason. Right? At least we hope we do. We hope we get it right. So this second proposal seems to make every belief every belief is either justified or unjustified based on the coherence of the whole system. This is not a good thing. So we've got to go to the next one here. This is his final version. This is justified in believing P, right? This introduces this idea of coherence value. I think this comes from Keith Lear. So whatever properties, and I say here consistency at a minimum V1, and then the other one that people often typically want to put in there is explanatory value, explanatoriness. So we can have that in there if we needed it. And so that gives us this notion of like coherence value, sort of instrumental value or epistemic value. And then we can formulate a final version of it here as S is justified if and only in believing P, right? If and only if the coherence value of S's system is greater, be enhanced by adding P, right, than it would be if it didn't include P. We still don't really, coherence is a kind of murky notion, to be clear, right? It'd be nice to be able to say more about it, but we're working with what we've got here. So then he points out a couple different problems that can come up for coherence theories, namely adding or dropping intuitively justified or unjustified beliefs might actually decrease coherence value in some cases. That was with the Miracle-Gro example that he was using about curing baldness, right? And as I said before, it doesn't really tell us which ones need to get dropped. So these seem to be major problems. Now there's two arguments that he considers. I don't know if people want to talk about these or not, or have any thoughts on them. So the first is this alternate systems argument. Folks remember this one? So the idea here is that if the coherence theory is true, then a belief's justified if and only if it coheres with the believer's system of beliefs. Right? Second premise, a person can make any selected belief cohere with his system of beliefs by properly adjusting the rest of the system to make it fit with that one. Right? So from those two, it follows that if the coherence theory is true, then a person can make any selected belief justified. And then this just takes the form of like a reductio. In 4, he just says, but wait a minute, I mean, it's not the case that one can make any selected belief justified by properly adjusting the rest of one's beliefs. So the coherence theory is not true. The argument's valid, right? What do people think about this one? Yeah.
It seems like, depending on what we take coherence to mean, it's going to make a huge difference. The way I've been reading it personally is like, if a belief is a predictive model about the way things are going to be, then the coherence of that belief, or that belief's relation to other beliefs, is just the quality of that prediction, like how accurate it is.
Can I say that again?
So if a belief, the way I'm reading it is a belief is like a predictive model.
Okay.
And then so coherence of a belief or a system of beliefs would just be the tendency of those models to go in conjunction with just in itself to make a prediction.
Yeah, I'm still trying, I'm struggling here, and it was my fault, I'm sure, just because how I'm feeling.
You're talking about induction? Inductive beliefs?
Sure, I guess, but I'm just,
Predictive sounds like that.
yeah, I mean, it's just, seems like what coherence would be, like a belief, like two beliefs I could have that would be coherent, like the sun is hot and the sun is like a furnace, of, a nuclear furnace more or less, so they fit together, they make predictions about the way the world is going to be.
I'm struggling here, so bear with me. Yeah, I'm not sure what to think about the predictive. I mean, I'm not saying anything is wrong with it. I'm just trying to understand. I mean, certainly in scientific, in the formation of scientific theories and stuff, right? We want a theory that enables us to predict and explain whatever the target phenomena is. I'm not sure I think about, or I haven't been thinking so much about that as I have just our ordinary beliefs, like the cup is on the table or the lights are in the room.
But I mean, isn't that a predictive notion in the end? I mean,
Yeah,
that's the only way I've ever been, like, explained it as, like, what beliefs are.
That's interesting. Is this something from, because I know you have interest in other areas too, like cognitive science and artificial intelligence and things like that, right? I was going to say, yeah. Does it sound, I mean, of course I don't have, it's not like I have the Rick Gallimore theory of belief that I can just pull out of my pocket and, convince everybody by, because I'm not really sure of what that is either. I mean, what beliefs are. Mental states of some sort, for sure, and they seem to take propositions as their objects, so they're propositional, right? They're propositional attitudes. But in terms of the philosophy of mind or the metaphysics of mind, are beliefs just physical states of your brain, electrochemical, neuronal states of your brain, or something more than that, functional states as opposed to brain states would be an alternative. If you're an eliminativeness like the Churchlands, Paul and Patricia Churchland, then you don't even believe in beliefs. Of course, I put that in a paradoxical kind of way, but the eliminativist program is all about getting rid of, ultimately, folk psychological states like belief. So they don't think that there are any such things. But that's a minority view, even among materialist philosophers. I think eliminativism is very difficult to take seriously. The rivals, of course, are going to be forms of reductive materialism and non-reductive materialism, right? So reductive materialism, you have the identity theory and you have functionalism. Non-reductive materialism is some sort of supervenience, right? Where, we've got a base of, let's say, physical properties, out of which these high-level cognitive properties emerge, but you can't. There's not a way of reducing, in the sense of defining the mental states entirely in terms of those lower level properties. So yeah, this is just interesting. I'm just trying to get a feel for how you're thinking about beliefs. So then so you're saying they're just predictive models, and then that's how you're thinking of, and so then coherence is what? Or
it's just when you add these models in together, if they end up if they don't contradict, or
okay.
Bolster one another.
Right. Well, I mean, in looking at the argument, I mean, here's what Feldman says, at least. or some considerations that we can think about here, right? To think about that second premise, this idea that you can just make any old belief you want, right? A person can make any selected belief cohere with the system by properly adjusting the rest. This raises this question about voluntarism. It's a debate that's been going on for a while in epistemology. And so voluntarism is this view that you can sort of have control over what you believe. And we talk that way. I mean, ordinary folks do, maybe not so much in philosophy, but you'll hear in everyday life people talk about choosing to believe. But when you start to think about it, it's kind of hard to know the extent of control you have over what you're believing. Like, can I choose to believe that the lights are off right now? Doesn't really seem like it. I mean, I could say that. I mean, I can mouth the words, but that doesn't make it true that I've got that belief. It seems really hard for me. I mean, try as I might, it seems like I just can't help but believe that the lights are on. And this goes back in some ways to some of the other things Feldman discussed involving proper responses to one's experience, right? Being responsive to the environment, let's say, in an appropriate way. So two versions of voluntarism here that we should at least be aware of. The view that people can literally choose to believe any belief they desire, that's a strong view, right? And then he's got a weaker version here that we have some level of indirect control over our beliefs. I think obviously the weak version of voluntarism is a lot more plausible. William Alston's a famous epistemologist who, I think he's passed away now, but he's got a really good paper on levels of agent control over belief. And this is another thing, scattered today, but as far as your papers, it's not too soon. Obviously, people want to have fun over spring break, and I get that. But you've got, a final paper that you'll write, and I'll give you a draft of, and I'll give you comments, and you'll do a revision. You can start thinking about that anytime you want. I encourage you to do that. Yeah.
Can we come to you prior for the first revision, go over what we're writing?
Yeah. Sure. Absolutely. Keep in mind that the revision won't be, the original, gosh, man, sorry guys. Anybody want this? Everybody's like horrified, right? Stay away from me. You should have stayed home. No, I feel like I should have. So yeah, the revision or the initial draft won't grade that. You'll just get, like, if you don't hand in a rough draft, that's bad, because that would mean not completing one requirement for the capstone course. But the draft is just that, it's a rough draft. If you want to talk to me beforehand about even that, I'm happy to meet with you guys anytime once I'm well. You don't want to meet with me now, trust me, because you don't want this. Yeah, it's not too soon to start thinking about that. And of course, I sort of in my mind assumed that everybody would write their final paper on whatever they do their presentation on, or lead discussion on, is what I like to put it that way, just to make it easier for you. I mean, if you're going to be leading a discussion on a topic, you're already going to have to be pretty familiar with it, right? And so it'd be a natural thing to write your paper on, I would think, just to sort of, kill two birds with one stone, as they say. But you can do them on different things. So if you do your presentation on one thing, you decide you want to write your paper on something else entirely, that's okay too. So, and then this last point here, Feldman makes, what's wrong with the idea of different alternative systems? It seems like that's not automatically bad, right? Because remember, we're assuming evidentialism here, namely that different people are typically justified in believing different things. Like right now, there's a common body of things that we're justified in believing about, say, the immediate environment that we're in. We're all justified in believing the projector's on, that we're in a room with other people, that somebody with a really bad cold is struggling to get through a lecture, right? All that sort of stuff, right? But then there are other things that I'm justified in believing that you're not, and that you're justified in believing that I'm not. So we all have different systems of belief as it is right now anyway. Yeah.
I think I'm a little confused on just what alternate system means.
Yeah.
When I think of an alternate system, I an
Mhm.
individual's beliefs as being ultimate systems of belief,
Right.
but I couldn't think of an ultimate system that I myself would hold, unless maybe I just use like a different lens.
Mhm.
If I were to approach cooking,
Yeah.
just being anal about it,
Yeah.
the different portions and stuff I use, or if I would approach it in a different way and just not really care, I'm being creative, being spontaneous, so I don't know if that makes sense. Basically, I need a better explanation of what an
What-
alternative system is.
Yeah. Well, let's see if I can help out here any. I guess the idea is that as long as you can get the beliefs to cohere, right? Like take a bunch of different beliefs, as long as they cohere, then according to this sort of version of coherence theory, you're justified in believing them. But there are going to be these incompatible but coherent. Like this system will be coherent, right? So it's justified. This system over here would be coherent, so it's justified. But how do we pick which one, right? Because they can't both be true together. Think of it, maybe this will help. Think of like two different explanations in a scientific theory of some scientific phenomena, right? So you've got one theory that says that, T1 gets all the predictions right, and it tells one explanatory study or story. And then T2, this other theory, it gets the predictions right as well, but it tells a different explanatory story about what's going on, and we know they can't both be right. How would we which one should we accept? Can't accept both of them. You don't want to just like toss a coin or something, right? This happens in science a fair amount sometimes, right?
Which one has the least computational complexity?
That's the
Occam's razor, honestly. But yeah.
there's those theoretical considerations, but I don't know if that's helping Tamir. I mean,
That helps.
I think you're making a good point. I think that's a good point. Well, just quickly here, I can end on this, but if evidentialism is true, right, first, so this is a different evidence argument. If evidentialism is true, then whether a belief is justified for a person depends on whether the person's total evidence supports it, right? That's just a statement of evidentialism. A person's total evidence consists of all their beliefs and experiences. Different people have different beliefs and experiences. So if evidentialism is true, then different beliefs and experiences can be justified for different people. Seems right to me. I mean, obviously, I've got the beliefs that I've got based in the experiences that I've got, and that justifies certain things for me right now. But I won't use someone in the room, some totally different person, right? I'm looking at the crime. I'm reading about the crime in the paper, and I've got certain things that are justified based on that evidence. Suppose that's all that I know about the crime. And then the person who's in the crime lab, right, or the crime tech at the scene, they've got a lot of other evidence concerning the crime. They're in a better position. So then naturally you're going to be potentially justified in believing different things. Right? Seems fine. The last argument, let me just show it real quick. This one I kind of like a lot because I remember when Rich came up with this when he was working on this. This is the Magic Feldman. People like that one? The isolation objection. I thought the Magic Feldman was great. So I'll read you the little blurb here because it's funny how he puts it. Let's see. Yeah, here it is. The strange case of Magic Feldman. Professor Feldman is a rather short philosophy professor, he is, with a keen interest in basketball. Magic Johnson was an outstanding professional basketball player. While playing a game, we may suppose Magic Johnson has a fully coherent system of beliefs. Magic Feldman's a possible, though unusual, character who's a combination of the professor and the basketball player. Magic Feldman has a remarkable imagination, so remarkable that while actually teaching a philosophy class, he thinks he's playing basketball. Indeed, he has exactly the same beliefs that Johnson has. Because Magic Johnson's belief system was coherent, Magic Feldman's belief system is also coherent. What do people think? So here's a formulated version of that argument, right? That looks bad, right? So what do people think?
It seems like if you added the condition that you can predict the way the world is around you, that would eliminate that as an issue. Because obviously, like if you're sitting and teaching in class,
and you have all the same
You have
beliefs
these
of somebody
basketball-
playing.
Yeah, and it doesn't allow you to actually like say anything about the way the world is in that place. So it's just like, it would be internally consistent, but it's not also consistent with the externality. I agree.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Tyler. I mean, certain, but that still seems to be the whole problem, though, right? I mean, is we, and
How do you put it?
yeah, this has become kind of a famous objection. I mean, not the Magic Feldman, but just this so-called isolation problem. And Feldman's co-author on a lot of the evidentialism literature is a guy named Earl Connie. And Earl was the second reader on my dissertation, Rich being my director, my advisor. And Earl's got a great paper called Isolation and Beyond, where he develops this sort of problem in some detail for coherence theories. And looks like what's going on here is that because coherence theories make justification entirely a matter of just how the beliefs hang together, and they don't have a way of accommodating experience or getting experience into the picture, you can end up with people with these kind of crazy but coherent, totally detached from reality. It's an I mean, obviously that's a fanciful kind of example. It's meant to be humorous, but you think about somebody with an incredible, in the midst of a floored schizophrenic episode, some sort of floored psychosis, where they're totally detached from reality, psychologically speaking, right? Yeah, you're right. It's a really bad, being like that is a really bad predictive set of beliefs to have or whatever, because you get a lot of things wrong, right? I mean, you walk out in front of cars because you don't believe there are cars there, or you jump off a building because you think you can fly, and that's not good stuff. But this looks like a pretty good argument to me. I think that's how Rich kind of ends it. So how many people got a chance to look at Chapter 5, the non-evidentialist stuff? What did you think? What are people thinking about that?
Well, I was telling Alan and I put Tyler as well that I feel like he kind of dismissed the causal theory a little too quickly,
Oh,
in my opinion.
okay, that's good. That's something fun to think about.
And the examples that he gave
Yeah.
to refute it,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't necessarily think they were the best examples of it.
Oh, wow.
at the time.
Well, that's good.
So like the first case of the puzzles, for the generalizations that he gave, it's like an all or more.
Yeah.
And he said the problem with is that generalizations do not seem to be causes.
Yeah, right.
But I think that that seems fair. But like you can make a generalization about something because you understand through experience. And,
Mhm.
this overarching generalization is true because things happen a certain way. You know what I mean?
Well, these are inductive, these inductive beliefs we
part of
have.
living, through experience, we know that part of living causes you to do more. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's impossible to live without that. You know what I mean? That's a guy.
Right.
I
What
don't know.
What about mathematical facts, though? Right? They're tough too, because they don't seem to be causes.
If
Hmm?
you, let's say you have a basic concept of addition,
Yeah.
you have the concept of addition, whatever theory, whatever you want to call it,
Right.
that causes you to be able to get to certain conclusions, like 2 and 2 is 4, because of the concept of addition. You know what I mean? So the concept of addition caused you to be able to understand how these numbers work together.
Yeah.
It's like a triangle having 3 angles.
Mhm.
The way that the triangles form, it caused it to have 3 angles. You know what I mean? By drawing 3 lines a
Yeah.
certain way,
Right.
it caused this thing to appear. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean, it's more like a shot in the dark. It's more like kind of trying to hold on to the causation,
Mhm.
but it didn't really seem to kind of refute it. I don't know.
Hmm.
And then the other one I really didn't like was the poison and the heart attack.
Yeah. What
And I
was,
was like, I don't think any theory of knowledge would be able to explain that. You know what I mean?
so wait, which side are you on? Because let's remember how that case is supposed to go, right?
Yeah.
Turns out that it's supposed to be an example, an instance of a case where the person knows that whatever the guy's name is, right? Alan's died.
Yeah.
He knows that because he knows he's taken a fatal dose of a poison, but that's not actually what killed him. It's overdetermination.
Yeah, but it seemed like, I don't know, it just seemed like nothing else would no theory of knowledge would be able to explain that right off the bat until an autopsy and found out that, like, oh, it actually wasn't the poison that killed him, it was the heart attack that killed him.
Yeah. Well, I think Feldman's point is just that, well, obviously hopefully it's pretty clear to people already if you've started reading the chapter. I mean, this is a non-evidentialist account, and Feldman's one of the pioneering guys behind evidentialism. So he's not a big fan of these so-called externalist theories. I don't think he's introduced that language at this point, but maybe I should just say a little bit about that. So yeah, I think that's fair, Dominic. I mean, if you wanted to pick at that one, I guess, I mean, I still feel like the point he's trying to make is that, look, I mean, intuitively, and you know, people's intuitions sometimes don't agree, but it seems like he's able to rightly claim to know that the guy's dead, even though he's unaware of what the actual cause was. And Feldman takes the moral of that story to be that you don't really have to know the cause or be able to correctly reconstruct the causal chain in order to have knowledge, which that flies right in the face of the causal theory, right? That was Goldman's whole motivation.
Yeah.
This stuff started happening in the late 60s. Alvin Goldman is, as far as I know, he's still, he might be an emeritus professor right now, but he's one of the big names in epistemology. Very, very famous. His main contribution, as I see it at this point, is probably a sustained development of a theory called reliabilism, which is the last one that Feldman discusses in here. So he looks at four of them. There's the causal theory, there's No's truth tracking theory, right? There's Plantinga's proper functionalism, which I know Zach's interested in, and then finally the process reliabilism. So Goldman, for a long time in the late 60s, he was already kind of, and he became famous for it in part because for a long, long time people didn't reject, I mean, the evidentialist sort of perspective held sway, right? There's a long tradition going back. Think about the early moderns. People like Descartes and Locke. I mean, one's a rationalist, one's an empiricist, but their epistemologies are, at least they fairly similar in the sense that they're still evidentialist, right? And that they're internalist as well. Now, there are some people in the history of epistemology who've departed from internalism, so maybe just I'll end on this for today. I didn't end as much early as I was thinking I would, but so internalism and externalism is a controversy, contemporary controversy in epistemology over the nature of the justification conferring properties. In other words, what is it in virtue of which a justified belief is justified? What kinds of properties can figure into or contribute to justification? Internalists think that whatever else you want to say, those properties need to be relevantly internal in a sense that has to be described. Internal, typically, the way I think of it is internal to the consciousness of the agent, right? There are things the agent is consciously aware of or could become aware of. We can see how a person could have access. So like there's one kind of internalism called access internalism. You have access to whatever your justification is. That's one sort of view. Another sort of view is what's called externalism, which is this idea that, no, you know, there are things out there that are external to the awareness or consciousness of the agent that can still make for justification or contribute justification to a belief or qualify as a justification conferring property. So internally accessible items would be things like evidence, understood as evidentialists understand it, right? Your beliefs or justified beliefs and experiences, that's all stuff that you have immediate access to, right? Arguments, reasons, those sorts of things, right? External making things would be things like truth. Truth is external. You don't have direct access to that. That's what we're trying to get at through using our evidence, right? The reliability of either the belief or the process that sustains it or brought it about. The causal history of that belief, so the etiology of the belief. All of those kinds of features, right, are external to your immediate awareness. It's not something you can't know upon reflection what anything about those kind of facts. Not saying they're not important, they are. It's just that they're external features, right? So in the late 60s, partly largely under the sort of auspices of Goldman, the causal theory started. It was one of the first ones to say, look, maybe what we need to do is get rid of the justification condition and replace it with an external condition, right? So you've got truth, instead of justified true belief, you hang on to true belief, you gotta have that, right? But we're gonna get rid of justification, at least understood internalistically, and replace it with either what we're gonna call justification but analyze in an externalist manner, or just not even call it justification at all. Like people like Nozick just drop it, right, in his truth tracking approach. So,
Why do you have to get rid of justification? That seems kind of odd, because in the,
now some people don't think you need justification, and that's weird, right?
because-
I agree.
Yeah, because for the true beauty case that he gave,
Mhm.
yeah, it seems kind of weird that he just, like, said that, he said Smith sees one of them, and for no good reason, he just assumes that it's
Judy,
or
yeah.
Judy or whatever. And he was like, yeah, this is correctly reconstructed, a causal chain.
Yep.
That would justify, but I'm like, yeah, like, don't you still need a little bit of justification for this causal theory, or does causal theory kind of just be like, you don't need any justification, so, or your justification is your causal, or is your,
Yeah.
causal chain.
Yeah, yeah. So in the original version, Goldman kind of, he's sort of his own little thing. Like you could write a lot just about his views because they've evolved over the years. The early view, the causal theory, was his in the late '60s, but then he dropped that eventually and switched over to what's come to be called reliabilism, which is a little bit of a different kind of view. The idea is, I think Goldman just, the causal theory is certainly an early externalist approach. But I think what Goldman, and it drops the notion of justification, right? So that's pretty highly externalist. But then he came back around later in the 80s, and he said, in the late 70s and the 80s and up through the 90s, and he said, well, no, we're gonna keep justification, but we're gonna analyze justification externalistically in terms of the kinds of processes that produce or sustain the belief. Are they reliable? And he's written quite a bit on this. His Epistemology and Cognition was kind of a groundbreaking book for reliabilism as an approach to thinking about the third condition. So I see what you're saying. I mean, in some ways it's tempting to say, well, look, I mean, you guys are using this, it's just fighting over semantics, right? I mean, are we going to call it justification and then analyze it externalistically? Or are we going to just say that we don't think you have to have justification in order to have knowledge? You just have to have true belief plus some other naturalistically acceptable thing. You can see why these guys like Goldman and Nozick and Dretske and Plantinga now with his epistemology, what they're part of what they're up to is maybe not so much Plantinga, because he says his view's a naturalistic approach, but it's hard to see anything more supernatural than having God in your system. That's pretty supernatural. He calls it naturalistic epistemology. But what they're really wanting to do is to try to make whatever their theory of knowledge or justification is amenable to scientific, science-minded folks, right? And people who, like Goldman's very interested in cognitive science. So obviously, if you've got that kind of slant on epistemology, you're thinking, well, epistemology would be well served if it could get more in line with what we're finding out in cognitive science and psychology, right, and neuroscience. If you think that that's a good idea, then having your either your analysis of justification or dropping it altogether in favor of an external making features is really tempting. It's appealing. But and part of the other thing that they don't like about the evidentialist approaches is that notice that the justification making features on the internalist views are all things that are evaluative or normative in nature. They're not further reducible. At least we can't do it yet. I mean, obviously, to say that a belief is justified is to make an evaluative claim about it, a normative claim, right? It's one that you ought to have. It's justified, or it's permissible for you to have. And if supervenience is right, which it seems to be, that the normative or evaluative aspects of reality supervene on some more fundamental aspects, then obviously there's something out there that's doing it. But the problem is that we're not aware of the processing at that level. That's at a much lower level, further down, right? What you're aware of is the evidence that you've got. You're aware of certain experiences, certain other beliefs that you can know upon reflection what your evidence is. But you don't have independent access to any of these, well, whatever you want to call them, these external making features, right? That the putative naturalizers would really like. Because they're trying to they're trying to do scientific epistemology instead of old-fashioned traditional epistemology. So well, that's probably enough for today. I'm going to hold because I'm wearing down. I know you guys are probably tired as well. If you haven't done it, dig into Chapter 5. There's a prompt out there in the discussion boards. I'll be hopefully feeling better on Wednesday, and we'll get through as much of Chapter 5 as we can. And then next week, I think 6 and 7 are both dedicated to skepticism. Let me just check. Yeah, 6 and 7 are both skepticism. And so if we can get through that next week, then that leaves us after spring break with a couple of meetings to wrap up the book before we start the presentations. Cool. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Hope you have a good one and stay well.